Hello, everyone. I'm Dijon, and welcome to Mustardcast, the podcast about the art of storytelling and how to use across different mediums. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see our channel grow, and to click the notification bell so that you're notified when we post. Today, we have a special guest. Amir couldn't make it. He had to go out of town. So today we have Mr. Ahmed. You'd like to introduce yourself?
Greetings all. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, Deshaun, and thanks Mustardcast fans for having me today. My name's Ahmed Abdullah, and I'm a media instructor. I've been teaching graphic design, photography, photo editing for going on 10 years now. Deshaun is actually one of my current students and has been for the past almost 3 years. I got a Punisher t-shirt on, so as you can see, I'm a little bit of a fan. And this happened by happenstance. I didn't even plan it that way. I've been into comic books, graphic novels, sci-fi, video games, you name it, pretty much since I was a kid. And over the course of my adult life and career, I found ways to merge that in with my interests of art and technology. So that's been what I've been doing. I love doing it. I've been keeping up with the Mustardcast since its inception. A lot of great conversation, a lot of great dialogue happening on here. Some interesting stuff, and I learn something new every time I check out an episode. So I think that should cover it, Deshaun, just about.
So yeah, coincidentally, I'm also wearing a wide angle shirt. So yeah. So we're gonna start with what media we're consuming. I usually let Amir start off because if I don't, I'll forget and just keep going to the next section. So I'll let you start.
Sure. So what media am I consuming? So I was on I had a bit of a travel behind me yesterday, about an hour's worth of driving. So I tuned into, I keep wanting to say Vince Staples, Isaiah Rashad's new album. It reminds me in some ways of Pusha T's, what is that, Daytona album some years ago. Great production, not too big of a fan of Isaiah Rashad. I've been, hearing from people whose artistic mind I trust that he's a great artist and I would like him, so I checked it out. But yeah, I was listening to that in the car. I've been off and on checking out this book, Street Art Africa, that my younger sister bought for me when we were up in New York at the Met a few months ago. A lot of cool imagery, a lot of very diverse street art styles and images popping up, from geometric shapes to like realistic art, super abstract art, all that kind of good stuff. I'm replaying Red Dead Redemption from scratch, and it's so nostalgic, but it also I think it aged really well. I'm looking forward to Nail's album, as a artist from the UK. I'm looking forward to Nail's new album. There's a sneak peek single that she dropped, and I'm really got me really excited for the full project. But media. We just the book club that I'm a part of. We just finished Transatlantic Africa by Kwesi Konadu. Really interesting stuff. I have a tendency. We finished that book 2 weeks ago, I think, but after I finish a book, I do this thing where I automatically just start reading it over again from the beginning to catch up on maybe some stuff that I didn't know or didn't see before. So that's pretty much the media that I'm taking in and have been taking in over the past, I want to say maybe week and a half.
Yeah. I was gonna say something, I forgot because I was too busy thinking about other things. But yeah. So for me, I watched a couple movies. I watched Snake Eyes in theaters. It was very disappointing. I'll talk more about that later once we get to the movie and TV section of the podcast. I saw Space Jam: New Legacy. We'll be discussing that later. Yeah, Masters of the Universe Revelation released on Netflix like a week ago. It's pretty good so far. People are upset that it doesn't focus as much on He-Man as they thought it would, which I can't blame them for, because the original series was called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. So when they make a new one, you expect them to focus on He-Man a bit more. And essentially they expect it to be a bit more mature version of the original. You can't hear anything in the background, can you?
Not really, no.
Okay. Yeah, I've also been watching BoJack Horseman, and that's been really good. I'm on season 2. I forget what episode I'm on. Yeah, I'm in season 3. I forget what episode I'm on though. And it's been really good so far. I'm sorry, there's a lot more people here than usual. I'm sorry, somebody just knocking the door. Okay, this whole first section gonna be real dicey to edit. But yeah, BoJack Horseman's been really good so far. I've talked to you about it. I don't tend to watch like things that are meant for comedy purely for the most part, but this one definitely has a lot of really sad undertones, and I really enjoyed that. I got to an episode that you've seen the show, so you probably know this episode where he went to New Mexico. Oh man, that episode was ridiculous. Jesus, I was not expecting what happened to happen that day. And I was like, BoJack's been getting better, and he, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but several times he basically set the standard like, okay, this isn't going to happen. I was like, okay, thank God. And then they just completely threw that out the window. And I was like, wow, they really went there. I did not expect them to go there. It was crazy. Yeah, I've also been playing a game called Death's Door. I beat it recently. It was really good. There's like a secret ending I might try to get later on, but for now, I'm just taking a break from the game. My little brother has been over here for a little while, and I downloaded this co-op game to play with him called It Takes Two. And it's been really fun. I don't know if you heard about that game, but the game is about like this couple that gets turned into dolls by their daughter. Like she doesn't do it on purpose, but she like puts a spell on them using like this book that she bought. It's really fun game. I also last night I was on Twitter and somebody randomly mentioned they said specifically for Black people, like, what is your favorite Maroon 5 song other than this? And they said mine is This Love. And I said my favorite Maroon 5 song is Sunday Morning. That song makes me really happy. I used to listen to it almost every day. And I listened to it last night. And then after I listened to the song, I had just listened to the album, Songs About Jane, because that's probably my favorite Maroon 5 album. It's a really good album. It has a lot of really good songs on it. Somebody said that it was no skips, and it's not for me. There's definitely a good, probably like 5 songs I could do without on that album, but it's still a really good album. Yeah, so moving on to current events, we're gonna start off with a bit of a downer at the beginning, but that really needs to be talked about. And like it was like immediately after the recording of the last episode, which was 2 weeks ago at this point. And unfortunately, I had to wait 2 weeks to talk about this, but the whole time I just kept seeing stuff about it, and I was just like, okay, I really need to talk about this. But Activision is being sued over a frat boy culture of harassment at their company, and it's been a 2-year investigation. And I have just a list of information here that I'm just going to start reading off. They found that employees are subjugated to constant sexual harassment and unequal pay, that male employees play video games during the workday while delegating responsibilities to female employees, and they engage in sexual banter and joke openly about rape, among other things. Female employees have been held back from promotions because of the possibility they might become pregnant, and have been criticized for going to go like pick up their children from daycare, and kicked out of lactation rooms so that male colleagues could have meetings in those rooms. And there was also a case of a woman who actually took her own life because on a company trip with a male supervisor, they were essentially passing around photos, nude photos of her. And I was watching the live stream the other night of people playing Breath of the Wild. Actually, the YouTube channel is Overly Sarcastic Productions. They were actually having a charity specifically for White England. And Miss Sue asked me if I wanted to check it out, so I went and checked it out, and I ended up sitting through the whole thing. And yeah, they started talking about this, and something that they mentioned was that unlike something like Amazon, video games don't really have, there are no monopolies. So when people decided to boycott Blizzard, it was easy for them to do that because they have other video games to play that are similar to some of the games that Blizzard makes. So it's very easy for people, it's very easy to just hurt this company and force change because there are other games to play. They don't have a monopoly on video games. There are so many different types of video games, as well as video games similar to what Blizzard makes, that people can just stop playing Overwatch and go play Apex. They can just stop playing those games and go play other games. And it already has been shown that their stock tanked like drastically. That's the moment people did. I think people did it for a couple of days. If it was, I already don't play their games like at all. But at that point, I probably would have just stopped completely and been like, yeah, I'm just gonna hurt you permanently. But yeah, the type of games they make aren't really the type of games I like to play. You know, they merged with Activision a long time ago. I'm not sure if this also bleeds into Activision because the suit specifically, you know, refers to Blizzard. So I'm not sure if it specifically is, if it bleeds over into Activision as well. I also don't play many Activision games because I haven't played Call of Duty in a long time. I just haven't been playing many first-person shooters outside of Doom, which is a very different type of first-person shooter. So yeah, I just you know, felt the need to put this information out there and let people know. You have anything to say?
Yeah, it like I'm not like you said, it popped up on Twitter, not kind of after my week's big round of like media consumption, so to speak, because I know I was catching up on like movie reviews, movie trailers, et cetera, et cetera. And I hate to say that that doesn't surprise me. I think that when it comes to like certain cultures in not just specific companies, Blizzard, I'm not saying that Activision was one of them, but just for an example, Blizzard, Activision, but also just in industries in general, like whether it's coding, STEM, whatever have you. I think that there's been a little bit of good and bad in some of the ways that society at large, but also like from a legal perspective, they've sought to address things like this. Because on one hand, you've got people, you know, people who are victims, people who were folks who were negatively impacted and harmed by some of the fallout from some of these cultures, who feel more comfortable talking about it, who feel more comfortable calling out the behavior itself, calling out the perpetrators of the behavior. And in the same frame, what's also happened is this kind of like buzzword checklist type of accountability, where instead of changing the culture completely and totally, and changing the elements within that culture that incentivize behavior like that, and don't incentivize action against it, instead of changing that, it's like, oh, well, did anybody get sexually harassed this year? No one's raising their hand. Okay, cool, we're good. And it's like, I mean, to say it, put it simply, it's a lot more complex than that. And it's going to require a lot more unearthing, because this goes back to even like certain, they call it a frat boy culture. And that's something that is correlated to colleges and universities. So a lot of these people who come to work at firms like that, they're already used to the normalization of that kind of culture before even working there, because they saw it modeled during their college days. And a lot of people, there's been an unfortunate kind of, there's been this, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but kind of an effort to monopolize that kind of workplace sexual harassment culture in certain industries and not others. Like, oh, we're a video game company, we're progressive. That kind of stuff doesn't happen here. Yes, it does, you know, and quite frankly, in a lot of different industries, people's unwillingness to see that it can happen in their industry is a large part of why it goes untalked about and unnoticed sometimes, to the point where the tough thing with video games and the video game industry is that this has been a conversation for a long time, at least a decade in the way that we're talking about it right now. You know, the whole Gamergate thing, you know, almost a decade ago, and kind of how that set the grounds for how we talk about that now. It started off with, you know, the idea of representation in games and how a lack of that has caused negative impacts to women, people of color, specifically Black people, people who are non-gender binary who work within that field. And now it's kind of blossomed into, yo, how do we address these issues in industries that, from the perspective of the more broad social consciousness, don't fall victim to this stuff. And said differently, it's like, you know, Hollywood, there's a frame of reference for talking about how sexual harassment happens in Hollywood. There's a precedent for, I was going to say persecuting, a precedent for prosecuting it, all that kind of stuff. But for this kind of still mysterious kind of lane of entertainment known as video games and, you know, gaming in general, there's not really so much of a precedent for talking about it. It's going to be awkward, to say the least, getting folks in a place where they can talk about that and talk about it effectively to where they actually stop these things from happening in the future. To wrap it all up, what I want, and I don't know if this is going to happen, but what I want to see from this is a willingness to kind of dig down and get to the soil of what causes this kind of culture to permeate the video game industry, so that not only can it be stopped in the future, but it can be stopped in a sustainable way. Like, it doesn't pop up in another manifestation some other type of way. I want folks to get a lot more genuine about their wants to undo those types of cultures, because there are a lot of people who go to video games as an escape from what they have to deal with in their current workplace, or where they currently go to school at, or perhaps, you know, what they deal with in their family environment. And then when you, as a person who may not know about this before, finds out, oh shoot, my favorite game developer is, you know, their company is not a safe company for women, or for, you know, whatever. It can be real harmful. So yeah, it's something that's heavy on my mind, and something that I have a lot to think and say about it, but I'll cut it off there.
Yeah, like you said, it's not enough to just, you know, stop it from happening. You have to encourage people to, when they see it, also to stand up for people and not be afraid of getting in trouble with their colleagues or their boss because they're trying to stand up for somebody when they're being harassed. You also have to, you know, create a culture where people aren't afraid to stand up for someone when something bad is happening. Yeah. So you know, moving on to animation, there are a couple of things we have to talk about. The first thing is they're making out, Netflix is making an animated Witcher series called Nightmare of the Wolf that's a prequel series focusing on one of Geralt's teacher, Vesemir. There was a trailer for it for a couple of days ago. I think it's being animated by the same studio that does like most of the animation for Netflix, and that's Powerhouse Studios. They did Castlevania, Blood of Zeus. They're also doing Masters of the Universe. They do a lot of animation work for Netflix. On HBO Max, they're at Genlock season 2 will be on there. I don't know if you know about I'm pretty sure you know about Rooster Teeth, like a company that owns like a bunch of YouTube channels and stuff. This was a show produced by them, and it was on their website, and they added to HBO Max eventually because they're under WB now. And season 2 is going to be, I think, exclusively on HBO rather than also on their website. There's going to be a new Dragon Ball animated movie, but this time they're trying out straight almost all the way through CG animation. And from the clip that they showed, the models look okay. It's easy to make a background look good in CG. Demon Slayer, most of the backgrounds, especially in the action sequences, are all CG, and they look amazing. It has some of the best animation in any anime I've seen in the past few years, Demon Slayer. I'm pretty sure it won several anime awards for that, for its animation. So, you know, I'm not worried about the background. This is more about the character specifically. And the Goku model that they showed, and they showed it, you know, in motion, looked really good. I always point towards like, was it Beastars and Dorohedoro for examples of like really, really good CG anime. Like, they look ridiculously good. It doesn't make any sense how good they look. The second season of Beastars came out recently, and I binged that. There's probably only gonna be one more season because in terms of the way the manga went, there's only like 3 major arcs. The next season might be a bit longer, or it might bleed into a 4th season. But yeah, the next one is I've been seeing this a lot on Twitter recently, that people are talking about how there are so many shows, especially on Netflix, about teenagers in high school and stuff. But there should be more about like college age kids. They always focus, a lot of the drama that you find in those high school shows could also be in a college show or, you know, movie and things like that. And you know, a big problem that a lot of people point out is that they always, you know, obviously this is being made by adults, and they're always over sexualizing these teenagers. And it's like, yeah, we understand this stuff happens in high school. We get that, but there's an oversaturation of shows and movies that are sexualizing teenagers rather than taking it literally just a couple years further where they're actually adults and they're doing this stuff on the regular because they're away from their parents. And it's like, okay, now you have a place where it's more okay for you to explore that because now they're adults exploring, the world. They're becoming adults. Whereas when they're teenagers, it's like, okay, this is not really necessary. And a lot of teenagers will still understand the plight of being a college student because they understand that they're likely going to be there in the next year or so. So, yeah. Before we move on, you have anything to say about the few things I mentioned?
Yeah, this is something where I've felt passionate about this for a long time. So a big part of the focal point of like the work I do in my career is centered around, similarly to the work that we're doing with one of our clients, is just helping young folks navigate that weird kind of timeline between 10th grade and sophomore year high school, sophomore year college. That age range, even if they don't choose to go to college, or if they can't. And it's such an awkward time because it's an awkward time for anyone. There's a whole bunch of chemical changes in your body and your perspectives on things are changing. Your friend circles are changing. Your relationships to each other and your parents and family are changing. All that stuff is going on. But then in addition to that, there's this outside series of challenges that you have coming from society at large. How are you going to start? How are you going to make money? How are you going to sustain yourself? How are you going to navigate more mature relationships that aren't rooted in we go to the same school together and that's it. And it's a really awkward time. And I think that when you're engaging in media to depict that time frame or people from that time frame or to kind of poke fun at stuff that you go through during that time frame, it has to be done very gingerly. It has to be done very cautiously. These are just my perspectives. It's probably like a disclaimer you got to throw in the beginning of the episode, like, all opinions shared on the Mustard Cast do not reflect, that whole thing. But I agree. I think that there's too many times they've defaulted to this idea of just like exploring and talking about sexuality and young folks coming into age through sexuality as a topic by way of like shock value only. I think that that's been way too many shows default. I think that at this point, if not all the time, it's been very lazy. I think it's very easy to get people sensationalized into like viewing and checking in on a TV show just because, I saw some crazy stuff on Twitter, a crazy, 30-second clip on Twitter. I need to go see what this show is about. I think that's a really cheap way of engaging that issue when there's so many more dynamic things that young folks, especially now with social media and kind of like communication culture being what it is now as opposed to what it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I think there's so many more complex and dynamic things that need to be talked about. Most importantly, like let the people who are going through that stuff talk about it, not like 46-year-olds who haven't been teens, in 30 years talking about what they imagine teens of right now going through. Like, I'm not even that old, but I would never try to like speak for teenagers that are going through school. And I'll say from what I gather and from what people communicate to me, it's like when that's an issue, it might be one of any 250 issues going on at one time. And then kind of compounded by like the stress that society puts on you to always be thinking about the next step. So it's like, yeah, let's have people who are going through this be the ones to talk about it. If not be more prominent voices in those conversations, because sure, like someone who's 16 is not going to be able to animate a Netflix show on their own, maybe more than likely, but at least use their narrative, at least use, something coming from their perspective more so than people writing for 16-year-olds. And that, I'll kind of close with this piece, that can get obviously very dangerous. I mean, we just finished talking about the culture of sexual harassment and abuse and assault at Blizzard. And it's like, we talked about what kind of cultural norms make those things possible and make them, for lack of a better term, sustainable in those places. And the same conversation can in some ways be scaled to the way that we talk about and the way that media shows the topic of sexuality as it pertains to young folks. If not done gingerly, if not done carefully, it can open up the door for a lot of like dysfunctional, very potentially dangerous narratives on the behalf of adults watching the shows, on the behalf of adults that are involved in creating the shows. generally, I think it's just been done very coarsely.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that could be changed about that to make it more safe. Because as we talk about all the time during class, Deshaun, it's like this media does impact, it impacts people in ways that sometimes they don't even realize until years and years later. It informs the way that they engage with other people. So it can be a pretty tough spot to navigate. I think that I wish that people would do a better job at moderating that, I guess, if I were to put it into a word.
Yeah, something you kind of mentioned was like the coming of age story doesn't just like halt when you turn 18. It doesn't just, you don't just all of a sudden stop growing as a person, and you don't all of a sudden your mindset doesn't become that of an adult simply because legally you are. Like within ages between like 18 to like 21, you could still tell a story that will very much be rooted in a lot of the drama that you can find in the show that focuses on teenagers. So yeah, there was something else I want to mention about that, but I can't remember. So Space Jam. We're not gonna talk about Space Jam specifically yet. We're gonna go into comics, but because we're on the animation portion, I wanted to talk about a section of Space Jam. I don't know if you've seen it, but this won't really be a spoiler, but essentially it was a section with Wonder Woman, and I think it was Gal Gadot voicing Wonder Woman in it, and also it was like there's a bunch of different art styles, both 3D and 2D within this movie, and this one did this unique art style for, what was it, Lola Bunny and Themyscira. And as I'm looking at it, and I've talked about this I think the last episode and plenty of episodes before that, Wonder Woman has never had her own solo animated series, like ever. She had a TV show in like the 80s, and that's it. She's been, in Justice League cartoons and in Justice League movies, and she's had her own movie, but Batman and Superman have ruled the animated, TV universe for decades. And she is literally the most famous, recognizable woman superhero on the planet Earth. There's nobody more recognizable than her. A close second is maybe Black Widow or like Scarlet Witch. And even then, they're nowhere near close. So it makes no sense that WB wouldn't have made a Wonder Woman series at this point. And, there's literally only one answer. It's called sexism. And like, there's no reason why this shouldn't have happened. Like, people are gonna watch it. They know that. There's no way people are not gonna watch a show about Wonder Woman. And I've been a Wonder Woman for a long time, specifically with Susan Eisenberg, the voice of Wonder Woman, and the Justice League cartoons, voicing her. And her universe is just so expansive. It goes across the entirety of the Greek pantheon, on top of a bunch of other, original DC villains and heroes, within her universe. And I just think of the art style, seeing that art style and seeing it made me so mad, because I'm like, give me this art style specifically, but not Gal Gadot voicing Susan Eisenberg, and introduce a bunch of other characters. And that'll lead me into comics. So recently, actually, this wasn't one of the comics I read recently, but I've been reading a Wondergirl comic. It's a new Wondergirl. Her name is Yara Flor. She's I think she's Brazilian American. And she's like visiting Brazil currently in the story. And like superhero stories go, she's slowly but surely becoming Wondergirl. And there was a DC did this thing called Future State, where they essentially I think a lot of people describe it as, and I think this is exactly what it started as essentially turning not every, but a lot of the like main Justice League characters and a few others into minorities. I think that was the plan like a long time ago, and a lot of people were like, ugh, that's kind of weird. Why would you do that? And I definitely agree. I was like, okay, I don't think you should just, that feels a bit forced. And it's not far off from what they did. The difference is that, well, characters like Superman, the original Superman, and Batman and Wonder Woman still had like their own series. They were just introducing new characters alongside them, either as their sidekicks or as their replacements. And Yara Flor was, I think she might have been Wonder Woman in Future State, but currently in the current comics, she's Wonder Girl, on the process of becoming Wonder Girl. And it was 2 issues and it was really good. I loved everything about it. And the series so far is really good. I'm interested to see where it goes. But also there was an Aquaman series that focused on, like often he does, the original Aquaman, Arthur Curry, retired and just became King of Atlantis. He does that a lot in comics and cartoons and stuff. And Jackson Hyde, Aqualad, the black one, became Aquaman. They threw the old Aqualad in the trash, which nobody cares about because honestly, he was boring. He was very boring. He was not a very interesting character, to be honest. And the Jackson Hyde is a far more interesting character. And this story focuses on him and Aquaman's daughter. And it was really good. And I'm excited for the new Aquaman series that's coming out that's going to be leading up to that future of him becoming Aquaman. But yeah, moving on from that, I also started reading a new Supergirl series called Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. I watched a video for the first issue and then decided to purchase the second issue because I was really enjoying it. The second issue, there was just too much narration for my taste. Like this little girl that is following like Supergirl on her journey was just narrating the entire time. And it was interesting at first, but then it ended up being the whole issue. And I was like, okay, you can stop now. And it feels weird saying that because the other history of the DC universe, which I talked about before with you, is almost entirely narration. Like the story is written in prose. So it's just a person talking and then showing images to go along with that, going throughout their history as a hero, while also chronicling a bit of the history of the overarching DC universe along the way. But yeah, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow has been interesting so far. I hope the third issue has a little bit more action in it and not as much narration. I also checked out the first issue of Icon and Rocket. We've talked about this. The Codaverse, the Milestone universe is coming back, and it's really fun to see him come back. Not a lot of people, I think it was a couple of people on Twitter said that it was okay, but I feel like the people who never read those original comics or know absolutely nothing about Icon and Rocket, it was really good. And for me, it was really good. I know of their backstory, but I never read those original comics. So seeing this modern take on their origin stories was really interesting. Also, Static #2 came out. So the second issue for the new Static Shock series. Again, I always reinforce his name is just Static, but I occasionally have to say Static Shock, otherwise they're not going to know who I'm talking about. So his name is just Static. Essentially, they immediately revealed his identity to his parents. So that kind of removes a bit of the conflict that you usually get in teenage superhero stories. So now that that's out of the way, it's like, okay, what are they going to do now? Because now we don't get like 10 issues of him hiding his identity or like some characters, their entire existence is hiding their identity from the people that they love. So like, it's, who knows where that's going to go now. But yeah, also, could you unmute yourself? Because like,
it sounds like you're just, I know I'm trying, I'll be chiming in, but the thing is muted, right? I forget that this is like not a professional thing and more so just like a podcast conversation. I also is a lot of like traffic and stuff coming out the window. I didn't want any like a random siren to just cut you off in the middle of while you're talking. It makes editing really difficult. But yeah, I'll go ahead and leave the mic on now.
Yeah, so I also got, along with all of these comics came out the same day. Which was dope. It was just a bunch of comics written by Black people with Black characters, all releasing on the same day. And this, the other one I read was Mr. Miracle, The Source of Freedom. So, and this one I learned that the original Mr. Miracle was just a stunt performer, like on Earth. Whereas, the Mr. Miracle everybody knows is Scott Free, who's the son of the High Father, which was created by, what's his name? Jack Kirby, the same person that created the Eternals and Thanos, and Spider-Man alongside Stan Lee. But yeah, at one point he left Marvel and went over to DC and created Darkseid and the High Father, and that entire pantheon of characters was his creation, which literally they're essentially the Eternals and like High Father and all of that are like inverses of each other in different universes. Like people always compare Darkseid and Thanos to each other. But yeah, so Scott Free is no longer Mr. Miracle, and a guy named, did I write his name? His name is Shiloh. I don't know. I don't remember what his last name was. Took his place, and essentially Shiloh worked under. He was trained by the original Mr. Miracle, whose name was Thaddeus Brown. And I looked it up just to be sure if it wasn't something that they were just like interjecting into his origin story, Mr. Miracle's, the original Scott Freeze. But it turns out when he first appeared in 1971, he took the mantle from Thaddeus Brown when Thaddeus Brown died. He was white though in the original comic, but they made him black in the current DC universe. And the current Mr. Miracle who took, this is getting really confusing with the different Mr. Miracles.
Oh no.
It's funny. That's actually what the story is about. It's about people fighting over the mantle of Mr. Miracle. So there's just a bunch of people trying to take this mantle. That's where the first issue ended with I think Scott Free and Big Barda's daughter coming and being like, "This is my father's mantle. Why are you wearing it?" But yeah, it kind of though honestly. And I mean, this happens occasionally, but the stuff that I consume, I don't see it often. The diversity felt really forced. He very often would randomly go on a tirade about being a black man in America and how hard it is. And I'm just like,
okay. And this is kind of, to me, where like comic books and movies and things like that, they tread that line that sits on the intersection of a couple of different things. On one hand, you have, it's a business, and they want to sell copies, they want to sell movie tickets, they want to sell streaming service subscriptions, whatever. And whatever the hot button topic is for the day, for better or for worse, that's what they're capitalizing on. So there's a lot of folks who are just inherently encouraged by the fact that they're having these conversations in comic books, graphic novels, whatever have you. And understandably so, the rationale that they have, that they approach it with is, they're becoming more progressive, they're becoming more aware of XYZ, they're becoming more embracing or accepting of such and such.
I was caught in that because I got this because I was like, okay, all these black creators and black characters are releasing on the same day. And like after reading it, I immediately regretted my purchase. I just got caught up. The other stories I read were amazing, but this was that wasn't the best. And I was just like, I'll continue to keep up with it and like watch YouTube videos about it, but I'm not gonna spend money on it because it's not as interesting as it first sounded when I saw the cover and was like, oh, that's cool.
And in some ways it's almost like parallel to the topic that you brought up about the teenage programming for teenagers on Netflix, where it zeroes in on this one aspect of being a teenager and coming of age, and this one small, very direct and limited set of narratives. And then you like and I've honestly, Deshaun, I felt the same way about Sam in oh my goodness, Winter Soldier, Captain America, sorry, not Captain, in the Winter Soldier, right. I kind of felt the same way. I felt that, and it's specifically with him in that scene, I felt there was a lot of potential to have a more honest and less kind of like bullet pointed conversation about that, especially because, as we talked about a little bit on Thursday, a lot of these superhero characters that are, I mean, really famous superhero characters, Captain America, Iron Man, Batman, etc. They're all coming out and kind of coming into their superhero-ness during real life events. You have Magneto and the Holocaust, you have Captain America and the two world wars, Wolverine, hundreds of wars and skirmishes and whatnot. And in that, there's an opportunity to have a conversation about how like those real life incidents and issues and happenings impacted life for just everyday people before they were heroes and whatnot. And it kind of, to me, it comes off a lot more organically. But when you take and then there's also, and Deshaun, I'm pretty sure you're going to get into this a little bit later, there's also this issue of, well, in addition to the people who we want to encourage by showing these black faces in comic book places, there's also people who we're going to trigger with that, because they're going to instantly feel like, oh, you're, erasing the whiteness of this character, or you're, trying to replace all our white characters with this. And now these people who kind of represent that other spectrum of the viewpoint are going to check out the comic books, check out whatever, start talking about it online for the opposite reason. And I think that in both cases, the root of it, I'm not going to say it can be solved, because it's not really, I don't think it's anything to solve. I think more importantly is just the dynamicness with which you address the issue. So for example, Watchmen, the TV series, the HBO TV series that got not, it was a canceled, I don't know. They just said that they weren't making a season 2. But I think that one did it very well. It wove real life happenings and events into a storyline that in some ways touches on the politics of today, police brutality, reparations, etc. And it did it in a way where you were aware of how it played into the life of Angela Abar, Dr. Manhattan, what was it? The 7th Cavalry was the bad guys, or anyway, yeah, you were aware of how, you were aware of how it organically flowed into that. And it wasn't a thing where, okay, here's a lesson on Tulsa, Oklahoma, and what happened. I'm sure there were people who went and looked it up after they watched the first scene of the first episode of that series, but that's not exactly what the aim was.
It also helps that the show was always, the comic originally was always steeped in politics.
Oh, for sure. Watchmen, definitely.
People always try to go, like, literally nothing. There's no piece of media that doesn't have some sort of politics in it. People try to pretend like it is and be like, keep politics out of this video game or that movie or that show or movie. I said it twice, but people try to do that all the time. But every single piece of media that exists for entertainment has some type of political view within it. And Watchmen has been that from the beginning, and they don't try to hide it. They were overt about it. They were letting you know that this is a political comic. And the movie, the show just reinforced that and took it in a different direction and specifically focused on Black people. And I didn't know anything about the Tulsa Massacre until I watched that show. That was the first time me and plenty of people ever heard of that. And then it was shown again in Lovecraft Country. Like,
yeah,
2 shows on HBO that focused on, that had characters who were in that massacre and and survived it. It's like Icon, we were just talking about Static and Icon. I feel like they are an example of the complete opposite of what Shiloh, this new Mr. Miracle, is. They are original Black characters based off of other characters, but are still their own. Like, Static was meant to be similar to Spider-Man in the sense that he's a teenage superhero. Outside of that, there's no similarity. Outside of the fact that he deals with teenage stuff and he's a teenage superhero, there's not much of a similarity, because the difference is he's a Black guy living in a Black neighborhood with Black friends and going through a completely different life than Peter Parker is in Queens. And same with Icon and Rocket. Icon is an alien like Superman who came to Earth and his alien form wasn't even that of a Black person. It was like very much like the type of alien you would see in like a sci-fi movie. But the first person he saw, he shapeshifted into, and the first person he saw was a Black woman. So he turned into a Black person, and he's essentially what Superman would be if he didn't have white skin. And what Icon did actually was never become a superhero. I think it's implied in this first issue that he might have tried it a couple times before, but as far as we know, he never even tried, because of just the way he was raised and the world he grew up in. He figured he figured he should keep himself hidden, and that there was no point in trying, really. Until Rocket comes along. Her name is Raquel before she becomes Rocket, and essentially convinces him otherwise, that he has the power to change the world. There's another character that goes by the name of Blue Marvel, who was written by a guy whose name I need to look up. He was in, I don't know if you've ever seen the Underworld movies, like those vampire movies. He played a werewolf in that movie. It's a Black guy. I need to look it up. But yeah, Blue Marvel essentially is the exact same thing. He is, except that he was human and essentially gained powers very similar to Superman's. And within the Marvel universe, like their actual universe, he was the first Black superhero. But everything about him was buried by the government, the US government. And essentially, at some point, his name is, not the author, but the character Blue Marvel, his real name's Adam Brashear. And he was around in the 60s, I think. And essentially, they tried to kill him. They sent him off on a mission that would have killed him, but he survived and just laid low for decades, until at one point, an old enemy of his, who's just as powerful as he is, and the Avengers couldn't fight, he had to come out of retirement and essentially help them out. He is literally how they would have treated Superman if Superman had darker skin.
Mhm.
And going on from, I went on a weird tangent there, but essentially,
Sure. It's all context.
yeah, it's all still context. Essentially, it's like DC has tons of black characters that they just don't use.
Yeah.
And instead, they like to turn characters that are a different race black, where that's not necessary. You have black characters. You have Mr. Terrifics. You have Black Lightning. You have John Stewart. You have Icon and Rocket, Static, Hardware. You have a bunch of characters who are black, and you can still make new ones. That's okay. No one's going to be mad at you making a new character, or taking a character that was very obscure and barely got any attention, that was a person of color, and making them more popular. Like, there are different ways to bring in people of color rather than race swapping a character and then having everything, essentially having their character focus on the fact that they're black.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's it. That's their character. They're black.
Right.
They're they're going through injustice in the world. That's their character, and that's what Sheila feels like. And I didn't like it very much. I regretted the purchase. Yeah. I was like, I don't regret the purchase because I don't mind supporting a black person, but it's just like,
without a doubt. One of the things that I look forward to the most, like, well, I mean, obviously not right now with Corona and stuff, but like when I go to Baltimore Comic-Con, that area in the convention center that's like, they call it Artist Alley. There's like a whole bunch of indie artists who are, whether they're creating like swag or, minifigures or whatever. There's a whole section of Baltimore Comic-Con called Artist Alley. And one of my favorite things to do is go up there and like look at the different, African-American artists and the different types of comics and drawings that they create. There was one guy one year that like, it was funny because I was just walking, I was actually kind of tired, and he was like, "Hey, you like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings?" I'm like, "I like both of those things. Do you know me?" But he called me, he flagged me over to his table, and he had just all this concept art for this kind of like retro futuristic warlock type of stories, and I'm like, the animation's great, I'm going to support you just off the strength of that. But then he started getting into like the stories behind it, and like he's got like a whole series of lore for the different races of orcs and this and that and the third. And to your point, Deshaun, like there's a lot of content out there that hasn't been tapped into, that has greatly developed storylines where it doesn't depend on these minimalizing tropes that reduce Black characters or Black people in general, for that matter, into what we've gone through at the hands of others. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a real thing. It's really happened. But I also think that there's a very dynamic, nuanced way to talk about it where it doesn't just kind of...
It's a matter of like, we've talked on this podcast before about the problem with a bunch of like movies that focus on Black trauma isn't the fact that they exist, it's the fact that they're the majority of Black movies.
Like, big part of it.
Like you said, it's not a problem that there are stories where the character, a lot of focus surrounding the character is the fact that they're Black and the struggles that they're going through. It's that they tend to focus on that almost every single time, and it's like, that's not all we are. We aren't just struggle. That's not all we have to offer, is for you to give a place to show how people are struggling in the world.
And what they also does that kind of bothers me even more, and I think that a little more conversation could stand to be had about it, is just how it paints a frame of reference. So for example, I had this one high school classmate who, prior to going to the school that I went to, had never been in school with any Black people before. And he was super quiet, he was super shy. And for whatever reason, like, I attracted shy, quiet people all the time I was in high school, and they would just like open up to me. And he would talk, and it was just like, you could tell he was going out of his way to try not to be problematic or say something bigoted or some stuff like that. You could tell, but all the same, it was like you could tell that media informed everything that he knew about African-American people. Because although he wouldn't stick to negative stereotypes, he would stick to tropes. So even some of the positive stuff was very archetypal, like, oh yeah, athletes and rappers. And it's like, that's maybe 1% of us. There's a whole bunch of other people who are like accountants and custodians and taxi drivers and freelancers and a whole bunch of stuff inside that spectrum. I say that to say that when that frame of reference is created, a lot of people who don't have any other incentive to see African Americans, Black people in general, or people of color in general, in any other frame of reference outside of that, it impacts how they treat people in real life. Now, obviously, like there's no one, you know, behind the comic book viewer or video game player or TV show watcher saying, hey, treat Black people this way because of whatever. However, like it does impact it, especially if, you know, people are out here living lives so much more dynamic than what you've been allowed to see through, as you were saying, Deshaun, these very limited kind of character tropes. And when you give people the space to talk about, hey, like one of my favorite things about Into the Spider-Verse was, you know, Miles Morales was allowed to kind of be a teenager and experience a teenage awkwardness, everything from being like clumsy to sleeping in late and kind of like having a weird relationship dynamic with his parents. He was allowed to have that. Now, obviously, there are some people who don't go through, some Black people who don't go through that, but it's very rare that you see it depicted in such like a mainstream media platform. So yeah, it can definitely be and I just think it's lazy. I hate to say it, I hate to use kind of like default to that, but I think it's kind of lazy because there's so many creators out there, especially in the age of social media, where, you know, you have what is it, Inktober, and like you can just literally click that hashtag.
There were rumors, I'm not sure how much I believe them, but there were rumors of like the creative Inktober kind of stealing stuff from a Black person. And
yeah, I heard about that too.
Like, you know, I wasn't sure how much to believe that. I wasn't sure if it was true or not. So I was still following some of the prompts, but after a while, I was just like, at this point, you know, he started something that caused a bunch of people to make a bunch of different prompts for like different types of things, even things in different months. Like there's like mermaid, where people draw different types of like mermaids or like fish type creatures or fish hybrids. And Inktober, there was this thing called Blacktober, where you would draw a famous character and they look like they were a Black person. And I did that with a couple characters from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I think I did it with 2 characters from Part 5, Golden Wind. I did it with the main character, Giorna, and I did it with another character named Luciati. And it was fun. And I'm probably going to do that again this year. I'm going to do, for the most part, probably, you know, pick and choose from different other people's, you know, prompts and stuff, but I'm probably mostly going to do just Blacktober and characters that I want to draw, but draw them as a Black person. And that's fun. But I wanted to lead into something very similar that's still along the line of comics before we go to TV and film, and that's other history of the DC universe. I mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, and I talked to you about it. I finished reading it. I ran through all 5 issues. I tried to pace myself and read one every day, but one day I read twice. I read 2 of them, in one day. And after I did it, I was like, I should have held on. But if I did, I might not have finished it in time to talk about it here. But I really, really suggest that you check it out. It is amazing. If you want to get it physically, in November, the hardcover with all 5 issues in one is coming out. But you know, if you want to read it anytime soon, of course you get it digitally. But if you want to support a comic shop, you can. But like it was so good. Like I said before, the first issue focused on Black Lightning. Then 2 Teen Titan members, was it Mal Duncan and Karen Beecher, I think. The third one is focused on Katana, and the 4th one is focused on Renee Montoya, and the last one is focused on Black Lightning's daughter, Thunder. I think her real name is Anissa Pierce. It was like, as I'm reading it, I was like, I need more of this. I need them to focus on other characters in the universe. They purposely didn't do John Stewart though. Technically, like within the universe of DC, he was the first Black hero, but in reality, Mal Duncan, who was in this the second issue, was technically the first Black superhero. He essentially was a sidekick to the sidekicks. That's essentially what his comic's about. He was a sidekick to the Teen Titans. He was essentially their sidekick, where, you know, obviously every single member of the Teen Titans was a sidekick. It wasn't until the 70s where they started introducing Black characters within, specifically minority superheroes within DC Comics. And Mal was the first one. Then it was John Stewart. Then it was Black Lightning. But in terms of being an actual superhero, because Mal didn't have any powers and he didn't have a costume or anything. He was just, you know, a teenager. He might have, within those 2 years, I think, because John Stewart was created in 72 and Mal was in 1970. So maybe within those 2 years, he became a superhero, because he eventually does actually get his own costume and name and stuff like that. But If not, then technically Jon Stewart was the first actual Black superhero in DC Comics, and then it was Black Lightning. And it was just really dope to see how Black Lightning, how he felt about Jon Stewart was interesting to see. I won't spoil that relationship. I'll leave that, for you to experience. And how he felt about Superman, and almost all the characters end up talking about Superman at some point because he's Superman. Both Superman and Batman are two characters that they always end up mentioning because of just how big those characters are, even within their own universe, but especially Superman, and how a lot of them see Superman as, obviously he only focuses on big threats. He never comes down and focuses on small small crimes, like the stuff that are happening in their communities. But also Black Lightning, and I think Katana might also said that he feels like he's always seeking approval. And that's like a big part of him as a person, that he always seems like he's seeking approval. And they also touch on the appearance of Supergirl, and how, Black Lightning has a moment where he kind of feels for Superman and goes like, he thought he was the only person left of like his entire race, and how everybody was happy that he actually had another family member, and that not everybody from his race was gone. It was really cool. I really loved it. I don't want to talk about it too much. There's so much I want to talk about, but I don't want to go into any specific details because I don't want to ruin it for anyone. So,
you gotta do like a spoiler section and be like, hey, if you don't want any spoilers, skip to 18 minutes and 37 seconds.
I do that. I just don't want to spoil it for you because I don't know if you're gonna read it.
I'm so backlogged on like comics to read and like video games to play, but that does sound interesting. I think I'm gonna go ahead and get the spoiler-free version of that, but from you. But yeah, generally most of the stuff you can go ahead and spoil for me.
Yeah, but this isn't spoiler, but two of the characters are gay. Was it Renee Montoya is gay, and so is Thunder. And a big part of Thunder's story is that she thinks that her father is homophobic, but she doesn't know if he is or not, because the way he acts, he seems like there was like a situation where there was a kid that didn't who essentially didn't have a father figure in his life, and Black Lightning was trying to. This happened in Black Lightning's story. It comes back in Thunder's story. He talks about how he was trying to toughen him up and give him that father figure. But from the kid's mother's perspective, especially when he went back and told his mother, because was that he could tell that he was gay and was kind of essentially trying to make him more of a man, and what Jefferson Pierce saw. And she essentially talked to that person because he came and gave like a speech at her college, and he was like, yeah, I think your dad might be homophobic. And at that point she was like, okay, so I'm not about to tell my dad that I'm gay because she thinks he's homophobic. But yeah, the story with I think her story, I'm really racked my mind which I like the most. And as much as I love Katanas, I don't like it more than I did Black Lightning, Renee Montoya's, and Thunder's. And Mel Duncan and Karen Beecher's wasn't the most interesting. It was interesting to learn about them because I didn't know a lot about them. Okay. But it just wasn't very exciting to read as the other ones were. I'm leaning towards Renee Montoya. And I really want, as I'm reading this, I'm like, this could make a great show. Like, instead of the narration, actually go through the events. And that could be interesting. But yeah, I don't want to harp on this too much, especially since I'm being so vague about it. And people are going to be like, at some point, you just got to start talking about it if you're going to keep talking about it. But, TV and film. Apparently, Jordan Peele is making a movie called Nope. There's not much about it except for the cast list, which let me actually look at the poster again because it has a couple of the cast on there. Let me see. It's Daniel Kaluuya again, Keke Palmer, and Stephen Yeun. Stephen Yeun was in Walking Dead, and he also voices Invincible.
And he also was the voice for the first Avatar in Legend of Korra.
He was Avatar 1.
Avatar 1, yeah.
He does a lot of voice acting work, actually. What is it? There's a turtle character in BoJack Horseman who I immediately could tell was Jake.
You can tell it's his voice, right? It's a very unique voice.
He's doing an accent. He's doing like a New York Jewish accent, but it's J.K. Simmons. But after there's not much about it. I just know that it's very likely going to be a thriller, and it's Jordan Peele, and it's called Nope, and we have those few members of the cast. But also, reportedly, the HBO Last of Us series costs $10 million per episode. The budget for shows keeps getting higher. Every time I hear about a new show, the price of how much every episode costs, like with the Marvel shows and a lot of HBO shows, they tend to put some money into it, like Game of Thrones, which I still haven't finished, and I don't think I ever will. But
which season are you on?
I think I'm on the second season. What happened was I read the first book for school in senior year. I read the book, and then I went through I was going to watch the first season until I realized the entirety of the first book is literally the first season of the show. So I just started in the second season, and I didn't miss anything because early in the show, from what I can tell, they don't change much in comparison to the books. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this show, because my opinion is that the games are so much like movies already.
Yeah.
That I don't need a show to, even if they're going to make slight changes, essentially recount the exact same story I already experienced. Instead, there's I don't know if you've played the games, but I'm sure you've seen gameplay. There's a time skip at the beginning. There's a 20-year time skip.
Yeah.
I would like to know what
with Joel and his brother and the Fireflies and all of that stuff.
And Tessa, what they were all doing within those 20 years. I want to know how he met Tessa. I want to know how his brother Tommy joined the Fireflies. I want to know more about that. And hopefully this show actually touches on that. It would be cool if they gave us a bunch of flashbacks to that in between 20 years within this series. But I don't need them to recount the exact same story, even if they make changes. Because
even if the graphics are great, I don't want to see that story over again.
Yeah, I don't need that story again. Like, I was watching somebody play The Last of Us for the first time recently, and as I'm doing this, I was like, as you know, I don't know if you know this, actually, they're remaking the first game, and I was like, at first I was like, I still think this way. It's like, no harm, no foul, as long as they're still making other games. It's when remaking a game impedes the creation of a new game where I think there's a problem. But if that isn't the case, then it doesn't harm anybody. If anything, it does more good than harm. But it also isn't necessary. The game's almost 10 years old, sure, but it holds up extremely well.
Without a doubt, especially since they remastered it.
Yeah, it holds up ridiculously well. As I'm watching the dude play it, I'm like, wow, this looks like this game could have just came out on the PS4 technically, it came out like the year before the PS4 came out. That's part of why it looks so good, because it was like at the peak of PS3 technology,
right,
bleeding over into PS4 technology. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna play it. Like, they've got my money at this point. But
I'm hoping that huge price tag of 10 million an episode is good writing, great CGI, and maybe some crazy action sequences. Because the game is like sneaking around. I mean, you could go out guns blazing, but and there's so many scenes where you literally would not survive if you did not do the sneaking method. So I'm wondering if that's going to be some big, if the first scene of the first game where I don't know, was it Fireflies that attacked that Boston settlement or wherever they were at, and it was like an explosion and they had to run out guns blazing. I think just with the kind of topic matter that The Last of Us covers, I'd like to see a little bit more of that, because that's part of that story. That's part of what happened to cause the world of The Last of Us to be what it was. Yeah.
So I was gonna say I can't remember. But yeah, I'm interested.
You said you were gonna watch. You said you were definitely gonna play it.
I was saying I'm definitely gonna play the remake of the game. Especially since the combat in the second game is just so good. If they bring that combat into a remake of the first game, especially with the exact same graphics, it's going to be great either way. A lot of people are afraid because a lot of people didn't felt a certain way about the story of the second game. I personally loved it. I think it was a great game. I think a couple years from now, people are going to change their tune about it, in my opinion. I feel like that happens sometimes, because I feel like a lot of what this game does, the second game specifically, changed. I'm trying to think how to put this. I wanted to use the word revolutionary, but I don't know if that's the exact type of word. But I feel like they did something in this game that a lot of people would be afraid to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of people to go back and look at this and be like, that was a very bold thing to do. and they were very brave for doing that. And some people agree with it, some people didn't, but overall, it was still a really good game.
I think they could have, like, my complaint, and this is, I know part of it is just, it's me personally, my preferences for storytelling. I think the story was good. They just told it in the wrong order. I think that
I agree.
Yeah, I think the story was great. They told it in the wrong order.
Yeah, I think that my biggest problem is, without spoiling anything, is that the characters, the second character you play as, before she does what she does, I think that you should have more time with her. Like, I think that they should have actually went into the town, stayed in the town and got to know people. And then you get to know those characters. You get to like Abby.
Yeah.
Before she does the thing that she does. And then you go, now I'm conflicted.
Yeah.
Because I like the character, but she just did a really horrible thing. And I kind of hate her. And then you have conflicted feelings, whereas brand new character, you don't know who she is. You've played with her for like 10 minutes at the beginning of the game. And then she does this horrible thing. And then you don't play her again for like another 10 hours. And then you play her for 10 hours. And it's like, you're going to force people to play this character that they hate? Like, you have to make them like the character first. Like, not have us hate them, then try to force us to like them. I get what they were going for. But I think, and it worked on me, actually. I ended up liking her more than I liked Ellie. Not that I disliked Ellie, but I just felt like it was very purposeful that they wanted you to feel that Ellie's revenge wasn't good, because the whole time I did not feel good about anything I was doing with Ellie. I was just like, she needs to chill. I get why she's upset. Like, it was horrible, but like, it was hard for me to really agree with her. I just couldn't. But on the other side with Abby, everything that she was doing felt far more just.
Right. Like, for example, I
save people, whereas Ellie was doing the complete opposite.
Exactly. Like, so that whole mini storyline where Abby was assisting those two people from that faction that her and her branch of whatever was supposed to be against, and they were like supposed to be hunting them down and whatever. If they would have led with that before even showing what Abby's relationship was to that main character from the first game, it would have been like, wait a minute.
I think you're right. The whole swapping the story around thing.
The story it's almost like,
if Abby was like the main character, like, you know how in the first game you play as Joel and then you get a small section where you play as Ellie?
Right.
If it was like you play as Abby and then you get a section where you play as Ellie, that would have been far more interesting, because you would have grew to love Abby. But then, she does the horrible thing and now you're playing as Ellie. And now you're conflicted because you're like, I don't want to play as Ellie and go do this thing because I like that person, but at the same time, I don't, because of what they did. Oh, man.
The other side of what threw me off, and I made my peace with this later, but the other side of what threw me off about that second game was having the perspective and experiencing the perspective of that other faction, the faction that Abby was a part of, that camp that Abby was a part of. It kind of, in a retcon type way, and I'm just speaking personally, it kind of, I'm not going to say ruined my outlook on the previous game, but part of the appeal of the previous game was the title is The Last of Us, right? And so much of the appeal, so much of the ambiance of that game is like, it's literally just us left. Like, Joel and Ellie, she, at this point, it's been a 10-year-old game. I think I can say, Ellie is immune to the virus or whatever have you. Right. So there's this like pressness to save her. And then when you get to that point where you find out what you have to do in order to get the vaccine, whatever, now all of a sudden,
to remind myself when I'm editing it to put a spoiler alert tag right here.
Right. Yeah. Well, I just feel like after 10 years, that's kind of like what do they call it? The statute of limitations. But okay. Yeah. So spoiler alert. But no, everyone, take a scene from when you're invading, when you're kind of raiding a certain stage in Last of Us Part 1. If you take a quick look at some of like the goons that you have to like sneak past or you have to incapacitate or whatever, the facial features are really just kind of not bland. They're detailed, but they're very like, they're not individual or unique. It's like, oh, this is just thug number 1, goon number 2. There's no character to it. You don't feel any type of way about the person that you're like, like CQC. That's the
They
part too. They all have characters. They're all people. They have backstory. So now instead of it being The
kill
Last of
someone, they
Us,
cry out like, "Oh my God, she just murdered my best friend for
exactly. Yo, when
3
you
years.
take
I've
one
known
of
this
them out,
person my entire life.
right? Yeah,
They're
when
the
you're
godparents of my son." Like,
literally like when you're doing your stealth, when you're still doing your stealth takedowns, and they find the body again. This is probably some kind of spoiler, something going on. But when you do the stealth takedowns and one of their colleagues find the body, they're like, oh, they took out Mike, or what they say, a name, right? There's actually a name to it. So it's like, instead of it being this, oh, it's us versus all the rest of y'all, clickers, zombies, whatever, bandits, whatever, and then there's us. But in this game part two, it's almost like you taking it from, I compare it to going from a unicycle to a bicycle, in the sense that like they're both vehicles and they both kind of use the same mechanism to move forward, but one you have to really balance yourself to stay afloat, and the
yeah,
other one is just kind of like, whatever.
the second game is definitely a lot more about perspective.
Yeah,
And how in the first game, like you said, everybody's nameless. You're just bashing people's heads in with bricks and not caring and just having fun. But in the second game, I say this a lot and it makes me sound weird, but I'm a bit of psychopath when it comes to video games. I like violence. I like extreme violence in my games. Like, I pick up a game to be violent. That's why I love hack and slash games, especially the violent ones like God of War. In The Last of Us, even though I'm still enjoying my like tirade of violence, at the same time I'm still like, this is kind of messed up.
yeah.
Like, I'm still like, I can still like, it's easy for me to separate the fact that this is a video game and none of these people I'm murdering are real. But I can understand there were a lot of people, especially playing this Storm, because this game came out during the pandemic. They were just like, man, this is really bogging me down. This isn't giving me the serotonin that I need in this dark time. It's doing the complete opposite. Whereas for me, I was like, yeah, this is fun. But yeah, it really makes you feel for those characters. Like, a lot of people were very hesitant to kill those dogs in those games. But that's a whole different conversation about people.
Different conversation, yeah.
More about the death of animals than people. That's a different conversation. But it's like, I'm playing a game. I don't care. It's a video game dog. It's not like I'm killing a real dog. But it's also like they force you all the time, because like, if you don't, this dog's going to rip.
And their senses are way more adept than like the people who are out in the field looking for you and stuff.
But we could, like, that's the one thing that I'm like, you could hate this story all you want. To sit here and try to, because you dislike the story, somehow convince people that the gameplay is bad, you are being ridiculous. We could have a whole conversation about
the gameplay is great.
That game, because I think that in terms of stealth combat, this is only second to Metal Gear Solid 5.
Metal Gear Solid, yeah.
Maybe Dishonored, but I've told you before, I always separate Dishonored because it's in first person. But even though it is a stealth game, it being in first person changes the way it works a lot. So I kind of remove that from the conversation and try to focus on, like, in terms of third person stealth games, the only game this is second to is the fifth Metal Gear Solid game, because in The Last of Us Part 2, the stealth mechanics are so just, what's the word? Detailed.
Fine-tuned, yeah.
Fine-tuned, yeah, definitely. I forget, there's one section in like a bit of a cul-de-sac type area, and I think it's like the best stealth section in the entire game. There are tons of enemies everywhere. The moment you think you got everybody, and you stand up and you just start walking around like everybody
sees you.
Somebody sees you. It's great. But yeah, we've been talking about Last of Us for a while. This isn't even a video game section. This is the TV and film section.
I'm here like, oh, so what's the next video game? We're still in the TV and film section.
Yeah. So Micheal Cole from I May Destroy You has been added to the Black Panther 2 cast, and some people are saying maybe she's Storm. That's a potential thing. Like, I follow this dude on Twitter who's, I think his Twitter name is insert black character is something. And he talks a lot about, especially comics. He talks a lot about X-Men, and naturally that leads to Storm and therefore Black Panther. And he talks a lot about Black Panther and Storm's relationship. And it's something that I would definitely like to see within the MCU. They would have to throw away the other relationship he had if they were going to do it, which also makes me upset, because I feel like Lupita Nyong'o would have been a great Storm.
But yeah, sure.
She would have been such a good Storm, but it's too late now.
Yeah.
She's a whole different character. Like, if the X-Men were in this universe before, Black Panther came out, she most likely would have probably got cast as Storm.
Yeah.
but yeah, that's all I got about that. Just
Yeah,
maybe
that show I May Destroy You was heavy.
yeah. Also, like after I heard about it, I was like, okay, let me check out the trailer. And I saw it, I was like, oh, I did
The
not
show
expect.
was heavy.
I was like, I
Yeah.
did not expect that to be what this show is about.
Mhm.
I don't usually watch shows like that, so I was like, I'm gonna have to pass on this one. But I would say the only show similar to that that I watched was Euphoria, and I really
Euphoria.
enjoyed that.
I agree.
But I don't think I need another show like that in my life. I think
Nah, it's
I
you
think
gotta and you know, because of some of the content that show covers, it's like I'm watching it as a male and I'm having all kinds of like just stress and anxieties, and you can only imagine what like
yeah, that trailer, the trailer really threw me off because I was not expecting that at all when I watched that trailer.
and yet the trailer still doesn't do justice to what the entirety of the show really winds up being about, you know.
Yeah. So Michael B. Jordan will apparently I don't know if he's trying to do it or if that actually is a thing that's gonna happen. Is trying to star in a Val Zod, the Black Superman, one of the many Black Superman HBO series. Which is cool. I don't really have a problem with that because I would, I talked to you about it a lot about how they should make an icon series or movie, I mean, before they make us a movie about a Black Superman, because we have a Black Superman who's his own character, an icon. Let's do that. But a series is different. I don't like, they could be two separate things. I still want icon, but a Val Zod series would be really cool. The only problem with me is I feel like maybe Calvin Ellis would be more interesting because Calvin Ellis is known as President Superman. He's the Black Superman that becomes president. And I feel like that would be a much more interesting story to tell. The process of Calvin Ellis becoming president and then him being president and how that works. I feel like that would be a more interesting story. But Val Zod's story could easily be changed. Maybe they will turn Val Zod into President Superman or something like that. Maybe they'll combine the two. I also have, you see the notes here, I added it like right before we started about like John Wick, Metal Gear, and like 70s Kung Fu and Dragon Ball. So
Yeah.
randomly, I was watching a video. I told you about it, I think last week, about Stuntmen React. And they were doing one where they ended up mentioning the Jet Li movie Hero, and I ended up looking up this amazing fight scene between him and Donnie Yen in that movie.
Incredible
It's so good. It's a fight scene that happens in their head, and then when a fight actually happens, it's ended in one blow. It's so good. And as I'm watching it, I was like, how did they mess up a Dragon Ball movie? Because the blueprint for a Dragon Ball movie is literally just every 70s martial arts movie that has ever existed.
Literally.
Like, as I'm watching it, everything about the way they fight and the way the stories are told in those movies is ripe to be used to adapt Dragon Ball, specifically Dragon Ball, the original, before, he became Super Saiyan and they went to space and everything, because that focused more on an adventure as well as martial arts. That was the focus of that series. This was like the origin of the tournament arc trope in anime. It was from Dragon Ball back in the 80s. Like, that's where this started. And it's also a journey to the West.
Yes.
A very simple story that a lot of people know about.
A lot of people copied.
Yeah, a lot of people copied. And somehow they messed it up. And it's ridiculous. And I feel like it is something that can be done in live action. Dragon Ball Z is a whole different story.
Oh, yeah.
Based on the fact that we have Superman movies, I think that it's possible.
Oh, without a doubt.
But it would be much more difficult to adapt than it would be the original series.
And I think that's the issue, is the adaptation, right? Because if you look at Godzilla, there's the one that came out in 1997 that like no one claims, that no one even talks about. But if you look at like the source material, the lore, the 1970s and 80s, like almost not claymation, but like where they use like small model buildings to knock down with person in a Godzilla suit. Exactly. There's so much of it existing. There was some kind of an active choice to make the 1997 Godzilla and why it turned out that bad. Because I have my issues with the 2014 Godzilla and definitely with the King of Monsters movie. I have my issues with them, but as far as depiction goes of actual Godzilla, it was great. And so it's Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, by no stretch of the imagination are these very like niche, obscure animes or manga. Like, people who've never watched a single anime day in their life know what Dragon Ball Z is. They might even know who Goku is.
Dragon Ball Z is the Superman of anime.
If you go to the most out of the loop parents in the world, they know Pokemon, they know Dragon Ball Z. Though they know those, maybe Naruto, but they definitely know Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z. So it's like with a fandom that immense, and I guarantee that people would be interested in watching a movie, which is money ultimately. If you're guaranteed to have a certain viewership, what went wrong? There's so much. Because I'm thinking so much. I'm thinking about like Vegeta.
Like a lot of why it didn't go well, but I think it was a matter of the director wanted to do something more along the lines of the original, but like something along the lines of, I think producers kind of just like changing things as things usually go.
Yeah, but because I'm thinking of like specifically like Vegeta when he went Super Saiyan, but not the version where he turns into the huge ape, right? And I'm thinking like city destruction movies, Godzilla, Pacific Rim, et cetera, et cetera. There's a precedent for how those scenes can look and how they can look epic and everything. And we didn't get that. Like we got like Tron featuring bad martial arts. Like that's what we got. From what I understand, I've never to this day have never went and seen that movie, or I've never even so much bootlegged it.
I saw it on like TV a long time ago. I saw it once. Since then, I've seen several people on YouTube react to it, and I've seen it against like vicariously through that. But obviously they cut it up, so I'm not watching the entirety of the movie, which I don't want to. If I ever do, it's going to be with a group of friends, and we're going to sit there and make fun of it. That's going to be the next one.
And it's a shame that's the value it has now. Like it's the butt of a joke now.
It's the same thing with like the Avatar adaptation, The Last Airbender. That movie is really fun to watch and just make fun of. It is so good. I love movies like that though. I like movies that are just so bad that you can just come together with a group of friends and just sit there and
rip it up.
Like y'all can have a conversation because you're not paying attention to this movie because you know it's bad.
Right.
So the whole time you're just talking and laughing. That's always great.
I was watching YouTube.
What happened when I was watching the second Space Jam. I don't think it's a bad movie, but because it's not the best movie either, we were essentially just talking and making fun of it and sometimes laughing because there was, like I said, I don't think the movie's bad, but it's not good.
Yeah. That's like for them to be, oh my goodness, it's not like something that you ever. One thing I'll say is like The Last Airbender. My intro to Avatar was actually kind of backwards because I first watched the M. Night Shyamalan version, and I was like, that was my first experience with it. I remember it being in high school, and it would be on the TV when I come home from school, but I would never pay attention to it. I'm like, people are really up in arms about this movie. Let me go watch the TV series. And by the end, by like midway through the first season, I was like, I see exactly why people hated this movie.
But we're getting close to like hour 30. So
okay.
I want to try and get through. I don't know how much time you got. If need be, we'll go maybe 10 minutes extra. If that mess up your schedule or anything.
It's all good. I got time.
Yeah. So also with that Dragon Ball thing, in that same Stuntman's React, they of course go over a lot of John Wick because John Wick has a lot of great action scenes. And I was thinking about whenever that Metal Gear movie comes out, I would really love, because a lot of John Wick reminds me of the CQC from the Metal Gear games. And I feel like a lot of the things that happen and like a lot of the way the fight scenes are done in those John Wick movies could translate really well to a Metal Gear movie. So I really hope like whoever it was who was like coordinating those fights hops on Metal Gear. That would be great. But moving on, so the live action Batgirl has been cast. I don't know. I think she's gonna be maybe there's gonna be a GCPD HBO series that takes place within the universe of the new Batman movie with Robert Pattinson. So I'm not sure if she's gonna show up in that because of course eventually, we've talked about it before, Gordon's gonna be in it. Hopefully it doesn't turn out like Gotham though. And maybe she'll be in that. But she also could potentially just straight up be in the Batman movie. But apparently she also is going to be in a Batgirl movie that will be on HBO Max. I think it might exclusively be on HBO Max as well, which is, I feel like a weird choice. I feel like they could do the whole HBO Max and theater. I don't know why exclusively, but I'm excited to see Batgirl in a movie. She was in Batman Forever, wasn't she?
Yeah, Batman Forever.
Yeah. Those are another movies that honestly, they're really fun to watch.
They're fun. Yeah, they're fun.
They're definitely really fun to watch, but they're definitely
Tim Burton was in his bag. Maybe not the right bag, but he was in his bag.
But he didn't make the last two. He made the first two.
So what was the last? So there's Batman Returns.
It was Batman, Batman Returns, Batman and Robin, and then it was Batman Forever.
Oh,
Batman
okay,
and
yeah,
Robin,
the last two he
Batman and
didn't.
Robin and Batman Forever, he didn't work on those.
Okay, yeah.
I think he wanted to do a third one, but something happened that to where he couldn't. But yeah, Hawkeye apparently is releasing November 24th, which feels weird because we haven't got a trailer. I wouldn't be surprised if it got delayed. And whenever I say the word delay, I always think video games. Like very often is it like a movie getting delayed. That has only happened recently because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
More often than not, you don't like movies don't really get delayed. They usually come out when they come out. But I wouldn't be surprised if Hawkeye gets delayed because we literally have no trailer. It's weird that a movie has come out in a couple months, but we have absolutely no trailer. We don't know what it looks like. We have a couple images and pictures online, sure, but we haven't got a trailer yet. Same with Spider-Man. Spider-Man's supposed to come out in a few months. We don't have a trailer. We have so many trailers for Shang-Chi. But I think Spider-Man's a little bit more understandable because it's definitely probably going to tie in with Loki. There's stuff that happened in Loki. I mean, Loki's about time travel. And apparently Spider-Man's also going to be about the multiverse. So I assume
do you think that between Loki and the new Spider-Man is that you do think that there's and I know this is huge speculation, but do you think that that's going to be a way that Marvel tries to sneak X-Men into things? Because they weren't able to do it during Endgame. So I'm like, when are they going to do it?
I think that, this is going to be how they introduce the X-Men and the Fantastic Four somehow.
Okay.
This whole, like them opening up the multiverse is how they introduce those characters. Whether that's like a soft reboot where it's like, it's the same universe, but the X-Men existed in that universe in this new version of the universe. And I don't know, maybe they do something like that. Maybe they find a way to tie in the original X-Men movies with the MCU, who knows? But yeah, I think that's how they're going to bring in those characters. I think Blade is easy to bring in. He could just become a vampire slayer around this time period.
Yeah.
Or he has been a vampire slayer because it's been hinted at that vampires exist within MCU several times.
And isn't Morpheus going to be like one of the bad guys in the next Spider-Man movie? I mean, not Morpheus, Mobius. Mobius. Sorry.
Yeah. He's. There hasn't been a lot of information about that other than that one trailer, which feels weird. That trailer was so long ago. They kind of hinted at it maybe being in the MCU, but at the same time, nobody knows. Like they never said, yes, this is an MCU, or no, this isn't an MCU. We just, at this point, I just know that that movie exists. They haven't given us anything but that one trailer. I don't know when that movie is even coming out. But yeah, honestly, I'm gonna keep Snake Eyes short because there honestly isn't much to say.
I was cracking up a couple minutes ago reading these notes.
It was just a bad movie. No, like I literally felt bad that I invited my friends to watch this movie with me. I'm sitting there watching the movie like, I'm so sorry, guys. I didn't mean to do this to you. I mean, me and my friend was laughing. We were cracking up. We were sitting there making fun of it the whole time. But like, it was so bad. And honestly, I thought this movie was going to be about like the process of how Snake Eyes became stopped talking. Because some iterations he's mute, some iterations he just chooses not to speak. I thought that was going to be the process of the movie, but instead it was a bunch of shaky action with a bunch of actually really good martial artists, like the main character from The Raid, the dude that plays that character. There's this weird thing when I was watching this review where they also mentioned it, how people from The Raid, this movie with amazing choreography and amazing stunt performers, end up in another movie that, you know, focuses heavily on martial arts, and that movie's action always ends up being bad. Like the dude who played the character from The Raid played Sub-Zero in Mortal Kombat, and I don't know if me and you have ever talked about that movie. I hated it.
The wild thing about that movie is it started so strong.
So strong.
Like the first 15 minutes of that movie, I was like, wait a minute, this might actually be good.
So strong.
It started so strong. I don't know how. Like
here's the thing.
It would have been
you could tell that was the best part of the movie because they released that first 15 minutes on YouTube.
Essentially, yeah.
It was on HBO Max's YouTube channel. They released those first 15 minutes. I watched it and I was like, oh man, I'm excited for this movie. This movie's gonna be great. And then I watched it. You know what?
It would have been a better movie if the first 15 minutes sucked, because at least it's consistent. It doesn't like get your hopes up.
I don't like the Resident Evil movies.
Me either.
But the dude who directed those directed the first Mortal Kombat movie. He didn't direct the second one.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he directed the first one though. He kind of started this. He kind of started the whole video game movie trend.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I actually really enjoy that first movie.
Me too.
And I think that the problem with those Resident Evil movies aren't that they're bad movies. I don't think they're good movies either. But I think that they're especially bad Resident Evil movies. They aren't a good representation of that series at all. When you watch those movies, they feel like Resident Evil 6, but nobody liked Resident Evil 6. So
right.
That's
because there was a point at which that video game franchise pivoted from like survival horror to like this kind of raw action shooter, in a way similar to Dead Space in a way, but I know it happened way before Dead Space though, and I know we're going to get into that in a second.
Yeah, it was the same with Dead Space. The moment they went towards action, people didn't like it.
People stopped liking it. Yeah,
it's crazy because they made, I think it was like 7 of those Resident Evil movies before they stopped. And it was like they essentially made 7 Resident Evil 6s when nobody wanted one Resident Evil 6.
Essentially, yeah.
And immediately after Resident Evil 6, they hard cut to what some people would probably say the scariest Resident Evil game, which is the 7th one. I feel like that one focuses on horror more than any of them.
Yeah, and as far as like video games horror movies go, I think Silent Hill set a pretty good precedent, not a perfect one, but a pretty good precedent. So it's like when you're comparing Resident Evil to Silent Hill, which came out 14 years ago, it's like, okay, so where'd y'all go wrong? Because I feel like Resident Evil is a much less, I mean, Silent Hill's not like a
the last Silent Hill game came out 6 years ago. Was it PT, the playable teaser? PT,
yeah. And was that officially sanctioned as a Silent Hill game?
Yeah, it was officially a Silent Hill game, but they just never went forward with making the game with Kojima because of the whole falling out with Konami. What I was going to lean into with the whole director thing was that I think that because of those movies and how action oriented they are, I think he honestly could have made a really good modern Mortal Kombat movie. I think that he understands what Mortal Kombat is. I think he just wants to make action movies. I think he's good at making action movies. Resident Evil isn't really an action franchise. I don't think he should have touched that franchise. But Mortal Kombat, I think he would have done great making a new Mortal Kombat, because I feel like what he does is, there was a Monster Hunter movie. He directed it.
Right, I remember that.
And also Mila Jovovich, who is his wife and was in all the Resident Evil movies, was also in this movie. And again, people didn't like it because even though Monster Hunter is obviously an action game, I feel like what he does with his movies is he takes a very militaristic approach with these movies. And he did that in the sense that he literally interjects the US military into his movies. With Resident Evil, it makes sense. It's a zombie apocalypse. Of course, the military is going to get involved.
Right.
With Monster Hunter, what?
That's how I felt about Godzilla.
The military doesn't exist in Monster Hunter world because it doesn't take place on our Earth. It takes place in an alternate reality where there are dragons and giant sharks and monsters. And they're in this like enchanted forest type area. It's like it's a fantasy. But he for some reason felt like he needed to take T.I. was in this movie too for some reason. Who's it? I forget his name. Tony Jaa was in it. As great as he is, he should not have been in this movie. Not because he's bad, but because the movie was bad. And he, for some reason, was like, okay, these military people get teleported into this different universe. And I was like, why? That's unnecessary. But with Mortal Kombat, a big part of that story is military people being transported to this different magical universe. So I feel like he would do a great job with Mortal Kombat today. Just he honestly did a pretty good job back then, because back then there literally was no story.
Yeah.
There were little bits and pieces that John Tobias wrote, which if you go to Twitter and follow John Tobias, he essentially has the Mortal Kombat Bible. He no longer works with NetherRealm, but on his Twitter page, I've sat and read his threads. He'll go into a detail about the origins of all these characters, and as you read it, you go, "Wow, why wasn't he working on this movie? He didn't work.
And this is lore that existed when the first movie was made, or is this stuff that was added?
This is lore that was after the first movie.
Okay.
I meant why he wasn't a part of the newer movie.
The current one. Yeah.
Because he literally, he was the writer. He was the dude who wrote a lot of those stories and a lot of those characters' origins. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, wow, this is interesting. And some of it is actually different from what ended up being the final product. And I was like, okay, if you're going to change something, change it to be something like this, which is more in line with, the original story he wanted to tell. and it was pretty good. That was a very long Mortal Kombat tangent. We go on tangents a lot in this podcast. The first tangent we went on was about Harry Potter, and ever since then we call our tangents Harry Potters.
Harry Potter's. I can dig it.
It was a very long Harry Potter tangent, but we're gonna wrap this up with some video games because we've been going longer than I expected. Honestly, expected that.
Well, you gotta cut a good amount too, so that'll maybe even it out.
That might even it out. That always ends up happening. But yeah. So first things first. There might be an Ahsoka Tano game being made by Lucasfilm Games, which I'm excited for. Ahsoka is literally my favorite Star Wars character. And if you make an Ahsoka game and it's not a hack and slash, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing. If you make a game that focuses on a character that uses 2 lightsabers and the entire game isn't about her using those 2 lightsabers.
Star Wars is weird because there's so much action and technology and fantasy and lore. It's like a lot of times the different game series have to pick which angle they want to.
Yeah, the crazy thing is because it's so expansive, they could literally touch any genre they wanted to. And
without a doubt.
It would still make a great game.
Star Wars has had first-person shooter games, almost battle royale games, flight simulator games. They've had the whole gamut. They've ran the whole gamut.
And they're remaking, Knights of the Old Republic.
Cannot wait.
I'm interested. I'm not big into RPGs, but because it's Star Wars, and I feel like Star Wars lends itself to RPGs much, very similar to like Mass Effect, because it's a world that takes place in space, therefore making it very expansive. You can do almost anything you want.
I'd love to see like some people who work on Mass Effect work on this Ahsoka game, because there's just everything in because the Clone Wars, the series, like there's so much like politics and intrigue and we started off being on these people's side, but we landed on this planet and found out that we were wrong about our assumptions about this species of alien, whatever. And it's very dynamic, and like I think as much as I'd love the action, because there's a lot of great action scenes in the Clone Wars leading up to that new final season adaptation that they gave after the fact. But like I think there's so much, and I think Rosario Dawson was a great casting of Ahsoka Tano with Mandalorian. I wouldn't, and Deshaun, you've heard my kind of critique about when they cast like real people's likenesses in video games, but I actually wouldn't mind that if they did that with Rosario Dawson.
I feel like they wouldn't, like, especially if they're gonna go with a realistic like art style. They really wouldn't have reason not to do Rosario Dawson unless she's busy. But like at this point, whenever they do a realistic Ahsoka Tano, it has to be Rosario Dawson. But also there's a new studio has been made called That's No Moon, which obviously is a reference to Star Wars.
Yes.
When Obi-Wan says that's no moon about the Death Star. And apparently developers from The Last of Us that worked on The Last of Us, Call of Duty, and God of War have come together to make this studio. And apparently they are working on an action adventure game backed with $100 million investment. That's all the information we have. Now, of course, naturally, off top, you want to go, they might be making a Star Wars game, because recently EA no longer has the exclusive license to make Star Wars games, thank God.
Okay.
Not that they made some good games, granted, they made some really bad games as well.
A lot of really bad games.
But they also made Jedi Fallen Order, and they're making a second one. But it's like, it's not that they were making games, it's that they were the only ones allowed to make Star Wars games. And that really restricted the type of Star Wars games that we got. Now that it's open, we're probably going to get a bunch of different types of Star Wars games now. And this one's going to be action adventure, my favorite genre in video game genre. Maybe it's a Star Wars game. Maybe that's just the name of the studio. They just wanted a cool, interesting name, and they're making something completely different. Either way, it's probably going to be really good.
Basically, because they got Lucas. Because what is it? Lucasfilm, Industrial Light and Magic works on is a Star Wars company, but it works on all kinds of video games, movies, and TV shows. So you're right. It might not be a Star Wars game at all. Yeah,
the technology they use for like shows like Mandalorian, and they're going to be using it for Thor: Love and Thunder. They use Unreal to make the environments, the backgrounds that they project. Really? Yeah, that they project onto the volume, the big screen that they film in. They use Unreal to make those environments. Wow. Yeah, this is a really good article about the volume. I might have to send you. Also, if you have Disney Plus, there's a series called Disney the Gallery, where they talk about how certain how shows are made. And they have they have a whole season dedicated to the Mandalorian, and they have episode focused on the special effects, and they talk about the volume. So if you have Disney Plus and if you've seen the Mandalorian, because it might spoil some things, you should check it out. Dead Space. They announced an official remake from the ground up within EA's Frostbite engine that they use for pretty much all their games. I'm excited. I've never played the entirety of a Dead Space game. The first time I played Dead Space, it was a demo, which I think this was the first demo I've ever played ever on a game. But I think it came with, weirdly enough, it came with, if I'm not mistaken, a Godfather video game. I had a video game that was Godfather 2, the video game. It was similar to the Mafia games, actually.
Naturally.
And it was really fun. I have to look up some gameplay because I remember that game was actually really fun. And it came with that demo. And I replayed that demo so many times with my little brothers. And it was definitely scary for me at the time. But I played it plenty of times to the point where okay, now it's routine. It's no longer scary because I know how to kill everything. But it was really fun. It is on Game Pass because EA has this deal with Xbox where EA Play, which essentially is like all of the games they've ever made, is bundled with Game Pass. And there are a couple games being added to Game Pass, specifically Halo Infinite comes out in a couple months. So around the time that comes out, I'm probably going to resubscribe to Game Pass for a month or two, however long it takes me to beat the game. Probably not a month, because it's only single player. I'm only going to be doing it for the single player of Halo, because the multiplayer is actually going to be free to play for Halo Infinite. And yeah, I'm probably going to play the first 2 Dead Spaces. I don't think I'm going to touch the third one. But yeah, they're remaking it. They haven't showed anything but a trailer. There was an article that IGN made that I have a little bit more information from. So essentially, the original game isn't that long, and they say that it's possible to just sit down in one sitting and run through it if you really have the time. They also, seemingly there might not be any camera cuts similar to God of War, the one that came out in 2018. The camera never cuts in that game, as far as I can tell, and that was a really big selling point for them. They said it's seamless all the way through. The camera never cuts. They also talk about how they don't want to really change much about the game. They essentially just want to upgrade it, make it look better, make shooting and stuff feel better. But the story changes they will be making will help it tie into the other games better.
Okay.
Just to help the story be more cohesive. But also, I feel like this might be an opportunity for the first time to fix a bad game that people didn't like, or a game that people didn't like. I won't say it's bad because I didn't play it.
You talking about this? I don't think it's a bad game.
No, I'm talking about the third one, because if they're going to remake the first one, they're probably going to remake the second one, and then eventually they might remake the third one. And this might be an opportunity for them to just straight up redo that game. This might give them the opportunity to, switch up that game and make it more horror oriented and similar to essentially what people wanted from Dead Space before,
Will EA be just as involved in this one as it was in the ones? I know that was a lot of people.
A lot of the language they use is essentially about learning from their mistakes. They specifically say there will be no microtransactions. They make sure they make that known, that there will be no microtransactions or anything like it. They definitely let that be known. But yeah, that's all I have. There was a couple other things, but they weren't that big. And we're hitting hour 45. I don't want to go too long. So
it was Death's Door. I wanted to hear maybe a brief, because I watched gameplay of it, and I was like, we need millions of dollars dumped into this game to get a full-blown Metroid Zelda treatment.
To talk about it quickly, Death's Door was an indie game. That Xbox backed. That's and it's like I said, a mix of Zelda and Souls. Really good music. It's an isometric game like the early Zelda games, and it's really fun. Like you said, you've seen gameplay. It is really fun. It's also short, and so it was longer than I thought, because people were saying it was around 12 hours, but a lot of people beat it in 16. Because obviously that's probably that's probably assuming that you're good at the game, which
Okay.
I'm not saying I was bad, but I definitely died a lot because the game's built to kill you. Because and
That's where the souls part comes in.
yeah, the game's definitely built to kill you because it's one of those cases. It's like I mean, and the Zelda's a bit different with the heart system because the heart sometimes you get hit and only lose a quarter of your heart or like a half of your heart. And this, when you get hit, there's like different ticks, and you start off with 4. You get hit once, one of them goes down. So you get hit 4 times, you're done. There are little places you can heal every now and again, but they're like spread out in different ways so that it's not as easy for you to survive. And you can't find healing items like you can in Zelda games sometimes. You kind of just, if you die, you go back to the door and you start back over from that door. And when you're going through a level, every minute that passes, you're praying that there's a door in this next section of the map so that I can save here. And when I die, I restart at this checkpoint. The doors essentially work like the fires do. And
the bonfires.
it was a really fun game, and yeah, I hope they make another. So with the special ending, because I didn't feel like, I'm probably still gonna go and try and find it because there's an extra boss that I want to fight. But essentially the final cutscene for like the special ending or whatever ties it into a previous game that the developers made called Titan Souls. That's also kind of similar of isometric kind of action adventure game. So maybe they make a sequel to this, connecting that in even more or something like that. That could be interesting. Or maybe they just make a new game that's also like that has like similar combat. Yeah, that story was really fun. In terms of the story, it's about a crow who's essentially like a soul reaper, and he goes around collecting souls. But also, everybody's immortal. All the crows are immortal. But the moment you go out, you get a job to go collect a soul, you're immortal. And so you fight the beast, you go to take their soul. But then this other old crow comes and takes the soul and runs away with it. So now you're mortal and you have to get your soul back. And this crow got old because he also lost his soul that he was supposed to collect. And he's been looking for it ever since. But yeah, the story is also very interesting. It was a really fun game. I enjoyed it.
I'm wondering if those crows are homages to the crow that like swoops over and grabs you in Dark Souls and takes you over to another portion of the map. Like thinking about Dark Souls 2 after the night after the not Helm Night. Anyway, the crow that takes you from there to No Man's Wharf. I'm wondering if that's like an homage to that. I was just kind of curious when I was looking at it. But yeah, definitely. I think I watched up into the part about the old crow talking to the little crow or whatever right before that door. So that's where I left off when watching the gameplay.
So it's a fun game. Maybe it makes me want to play more games like it. Like eventually, whenever I get a Switch, I want to play they remade Link's Awakening. In my opinion, what is the second best Zelda game after Breath of the Wild. Amir, we've argued about it. I think there's a clip about it where we're discussing it. He thinks that Link's Awakening is better, but I talk about how I think not Link's Awakening. I literally said the same thing. I meant A Link to the Past. He thinks A Link to the Past is better than Link's Awakening. But in my opinion, Link's Awakening literally takes everything that's good about A Link to the Past and does it better. So yeah.
What are y'all thoughts on Wind Waker? Wind Waker?
I don't know. Wind Waker is an enigma to me. It's a Zelda game that I know exists, but I've never seen gameplay. Well, I've seen a little bit of gameplay, and that's it. It doesn't really interest me much in terms of the Zelda games. So whenever I see it, I'm just like, I don't really have things on it. It looks interesting, but it's not interesting enough for me to play it. Art style looks fun though.
The art style is the main thing.
Every time I see it like the art style holds up so well that I think it's newer than it is, but it's actually a little bit older than I thought it was.
Every day, it's almost like a Nintendo version of The Last of Us. It's like you're not aware of how old it is just because of the art style and just like the quality of it.
But yeah, so wrap this up. It was great having you.
It was great to be on.
Definitely have to have you again eventually at some point.
You know it.
I definitely wanted you on to talk about Milestone because we've had a lot of conversations about that.
About what?
About Milestone comics, and I definitely wanted to get that on the channel. But yeah, so is there like any type of social media you want to be tagged or anything like that?
Sure. So, I work with multimedia arts education. You can find me on Instagram at Pics, so Pics, not Picks. Pics by Ahmed K, so Picsbyahmad, the letter K, and that's it. Yeah, and it's not much there, but a lot of it chronicles just like personal art. But also that's where I have a lot of like conversations and dialogues with like other arts educators, more other folks who engage with advocacy on the grounds of arts and education, art therapy, things like that. All are some interesting things that I like to go over and cover via that social media. So that you can find me there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you can find my at below me like usual, and I'll make sure to put your at below you in the edit. And yeah, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel if you want to see more storytelling content, and to click the notification bell so that you're notified when we post. Peace.